I want to welcome you again to something we call the Great 50 Days. And some Christians have followed this Great 50 Days. And really, it's following, for me, it's always following the life, the resurrection, the events of Jesus after he had risen. I love these events. And we've been mainly sticking through the book of chapter John of 20, chapter 20. That's where we find a lot of these resurrection events. Please go back and read it. Or go back and watch some of my previous ones on the Great 50 Days. But I want to wrap up what happens at the end of John chapter 20 because Jesus has appeared to Mary. Uh, and if you read in Luke 24, he appears to the guys going to Emmaus. He's making these appearances. He even appears to the disciples that evening. They're behind locked doors, right? And Jesus appears to them, and and they see Jesus. They think he's a ghost, but I'm not a ghost. They're behind locked doors, and he just kind of pops in there. And he says, "Feed me something. I'm not a ghost. I'm real." And then he kind of vanishes. He goes away. And the disciples, and read this about this in John 20, they go, "Oh my goodness, Thomas is not with us. We got to go find Thomas." Read about this in John 20. And I don't know how long it took for them to find Thomas. Did they know right where he was, or an hour? I don't know. We don't know. But they go get Thomas. And they say, "Thomas, we've seen Jesus. Jesus is risen." He's risen indeed. We've seen him. You can see the excitement they have. Whoa! And Thomas says, "Guys, I'm not going to believe him unless I see him, unless I touch the scars on his hand and his side." And out of that, we've given Thomas the name Doubting Thomas. I think we've given Thomas a bad rap because earlier in John, when Jesus says, "I'm going to Jerusalem," and but Lord, you could die there. Thomas says, "We'll go and die with him." Isn't that something? Thomas says, "Why don't we but we call him Thomas the Doubter. Why don't we call him Thomas the Courageous?" I don't know. Or how about Thomas the Realist? He's saying, "God, guys, I'm not going to really buy into Jesus unless I've got to see him on myself. I got to touch him." And Thomas is 100% right. I don't care how passionate we become. Unless you see Jesus, unless you touch Jesus, you're not going to know he's real. And there are ways that we can see Jesus and touch Jesus today. Beautiful song about that too. Well, if you read about that, then Jesus kind of disappears, and they go get Thomas. And Thomas comes back with him. If Thomas messed up at all in this, it wasn't in his doubting. I don't think he was doubting. It was that Jesus said, "Stay together. I'm going to be leaving, but stay together." Thomas wasn't with the guys. And because he wasn't with them, they missed seeing Jesus. Wow. But Thomas goes back. And in John's gospel, he said, we were together. 8 days they were back together. 8 days. Behind locked doors still. For somehow they still don't. They're frightened or scared. And Jesus appears to him again and says, "Peace be with you." And then I could see him looking at Thomas and says, "Thomas, come, touch me, see me, be unbelieving no more." Now, I do not know if Thomas touched him. He goes, "Okay, I'm going to come up and touch you." But I know what Thomas says. Because when he really believes and he sees, maybe he touched him, I don't know, but he sees Jesus. We know what he says. And I think Thomas gives us the only doctrine I think we need in the body of Christ. We can differ over a ton of things as Christians. But what Thomas says, he sees Jesus and says, "You're my Lord and you're my God." You hear that? When you call somebody Lord back in their days, that means everything belongs to them. Our whole life belongs to them. But he didn't just say, "You're my Lord." He says, "You're my Lord and my God." See, throughout John's gospel, I think John has this one theme, stronger and always, right at the beginning, he wants us to know who Jesus is. The beginning of John's gospel is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's John chapter 1. And now, Thomas says, "You're my Lord and you're my God." A lot of things happen in John chapter 20, but I want to read to you the end of John 20, verse 30. Actually, let me go back to 20 because Jesus says, "Thomas, because you have seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who do not see and yet believe." You know, when I was a little kid and we were reading this, "Blessed are those who have not seen and believe in me," I'm going, "Oh my gosh, Jesus is talking about me." Because I haven't seen Jesus and touched Jesus like Thomas did. But I believe in Jesus. Well, here's how, in verse 30, here's how John wraps up this chapter. By the way, when John and the other people, they weren't saying chapter 1, verse. Now, we put that in. These were letters. Anyway, verse 30 reads this way. John says, "Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing you might have life in his name." Doesn't that sound like that should be the wrap up of John? Whoa, whoa, that's it. I can see John going, "Okay, got my gospel done." And Jesus says, "No, Thomas, there's one more chapter. One more chapter you got to put in." And that's what I'm going to talk about next week. Oh, cliffhanger. Or go ahead and read it. But we're going to wrap up John 20 with John 21. I'm going to call it, "Wow, what a great day to go fishing." That's not a bad idea. Read John 21. I'll share about that next week. But now, just listen to Thomas, and may it be true to us. We say to Jesus, "You're my Lord, and you're my God."